Hello, this is ASEAN Movie Pulse Interviews. I am Panos Kotzathanasis, and I'm here today with Aleksandra Minkiewicz, country director of Yangon Film School in Myanmar. Hello, Aleksandra.
Hello, Panos. Nice to see you.
Okay, so, the first question that comes to mind is an obvious one. How come someone from Poland ends up teaching in Myanmar?
Well, if you really think about it, it actually makes sense. First of all, of course, Poland is well known for excellent filmmakers and a great film school in Łódź, but also for a successful transformation process where media, independent media, play an extremely important part. So almost like a decade ago, 10 years ago, the plan starts to emerge in Poland, how we could share this experience of non-violent transformation into the democracy, especially the experience of independent media and the journalists and filmmakers, how we could share it with our colleagues and the citizens of Burma, who was then going through the transformation process. It started the transformation process. So at the beginning of the 2012, I found myself in Myanmar, in Yangon. The censorship was for the printed press was just lifted, and we started slowly very first projects focused on supporting independent journalists in ethnic regions. As part of this program, we were also supporting the very first film festival of documentaries focused on human rights issues. And this is how the connection, developed, and somehow I found myself involved in this filmmaking sector and the media sector in Myanmar, focused mainly on support for documentary filmmakers and also media people coming from different ethnic regions. And a couple of years later, I was actually offered the position of the director of the Yangon Film School, which of course I humbly and accepted. Of course, I was extremely excited, but I didn't know how many challenges will lie ahead.
And how many did they?
Obviously, like managing Myanmar is extremely complex country. There's a beautiful richness of culture and different ethnicities and religions, but this of course sometimes causes several problems. We are training young people coming from all over the country with different educational and social and religious background. So of course you can imagine this sometimes creates also tensions, right? We are the only film school in Myanmar which provides really hands-on approach on educating young people how to make documentary films. We believe that from a documentary, many things can grow. So once our students get the basics and in producing documentary films, they can easily now move on to other sectors and produce fictions, news, and other stories, right? Like animations and other video formats. Of course, funding remains always a challenge for organization like ours. We are a small international organization working in extremely challenging context. In Myanmar, we depend on funding from international donors. We don't get support from the Myanmar government. So we are never certain if we will be able to, move on next year with what we have planned, because it's like a, constant struggle to make sure we have enough funding to educate students and produce the films with them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And can you tell me a bit more about the school? History, curriculum, how does it work, the whole thing?
Yeah, with pleasure. So school was funded already 16 years ago by an Anglo-Burmese filmmaker, Lindsay Morrison. She's been working on her own documentary in the early 2000s. She noticed that there were so many young people who were extremely interested in what she was doing. So she started with like a short-term filmmaking courses And over a couple of years, it has developed into a proper, like a 3 years curriculum. So now we have an intake of 12 students every second year. So, they have to go through a very selective but inclusive recruitment process. We always select 6 men and 6 women, and our quota is like at least 50% of students coming from other ethnic minorities than Bama, which is the majority in Myanmar. So this is how we also contribute to a more diverse media culture in Myanmar, which for like 7 decades was basically Bama and male oriented. So you couldn't get other perspectives, you couldn't get other views. That's why we want to have more women and also more people coming from ethnic minorities to bring the voices of those people and to see how they look at the now, basically cancelled transformation process and the peace process. They have the students, they start with the introduction to filmmaking. We start with our flagship 7 weeks beginners course, where they get a sneak peek. Basically on the first day, they get a camera into their hands. They need to learn how it works and all the basics. Then we introduce them to the basics in editing, but also film history, film analysis, sound design, post-production, and everything they really need to know how to become a documentary filmmaker. We believe this is a long-term process. You don't become a documentary filmmaker overnight, not even after 3 months. It's a long-term process. So we make sure that they watch a lot of films, but they also make films. So because this is the way how you learn how to make documentary films. We are very proud of our, studio, sound design studio, one of the best in Yangon. We have our own professional film cameras. We have edit suits. So we have all the, we provide all the educational environment up to international standards that the filmmaker can dream of. So the students go through like a very intensive 2 years of courses focused on these different aspects of the filmmaking, documentary filmmaking. And the 3rd year of the study at the YFS is basically dedicated to work on their independent film, which we of course also support. We have international and local tutors. This has also developed over the years because when YFS started, there was basically no capacity to teach documentary filmmaking in Myanmar. So we had to train our own tutors within our train to teach program. So for now, we are trying to move more and more responsibilities and mentoring to our Myanmar colleagues how to teach documentary filmmaking. But of course, we still cooperate with our long-term international tutors who come from all over the world, from Australia to Finland, because they bring in the expertise and the exposure some of the local tutors don't have, because simply they don't travel enough, they don't have enough exposure to international filmmaking sector. So we really bring those people into the country, they work together, and it also helps the students to, for some of them, it's basically sometimes it's a shock when they enter YFS, because we have a very intense and hands-on approach, as I mentioned, which is completely different to the educational system in Myanmar, which is basically based on like this memorizing and repeating after the teacher. Here we challenge them to voice their opinions, we want to hear what they think and how they would like to do things differently. Which is, of course, one of the challenges, because in Myanmar, the teacher, the saya, is someone with the authority, someone you just obey, right? You don't make a conversation with your teacher. You just follow their advice. But coming back and to sum up, we have a 3 years curriculum. First 2 years are focused on, basic education, and then second year advanced education. Third year, it's the production of their graduation films.
So some of the local tutors that are teaching now, were there students of the school before? Or,
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So basically, most of our local tutors at the moment are our former students. We trained them, and of course, they were working with us for many years. But we are also trying to find local tutors like expertise in screenwriting. This is something which is available, and also we are working with young people who are educated abroad, then they come back to Myanmar, and they are also pretty much involved in the development of the film industry in the country. So we also invite them for the master classes to share the experience with our students.
And how are the fees for the students?
So there are no fees. So everything is fully funded. That's why, as I mentioned at the beginning, funding is always a challenge for us. The students during the registration, they only need to pay a very small fee of around like $20, and this is it. So we provide accommodation for the students. We pay for the transportation fees when they have to travel to Yangon. As I mentioned, some of them come from really small areas, like far away from Yangon. So we cover the cost of transportation, accommodation in Yangon. We provide them also with the scholarship so they can get through the first year at the YFS, because it's really intense, and we want them to focus on the learning and not to, do side jobs because they need to earn their living. We decided for this move because first of all, we are the only film school in the Myanmar, so we want to give the opportunity to people with real talent to actually be able to study filmmaking. And people coming from ethnic areas, in most cases, they can't afford, living in Yangon or studying at the university in Yangon. So putting a fee on top of that will already exclude like really talented people because it will basically be open only for those who can afford it, and those who can afford it can easily go abroad and study abroad.
And how would you say this whole situation with COVID changed the classes?
Oh God, that was really challenging. So so first of all, like this train to teach program that I mentioned before was real help for us, because we basically moved a little bit more responsibilities to our local tutors and also more experienced students, like student trainers, student editors, and directing mentors who are usually local trainers, and who are our advanced students who are mentoring younger students. So we introduced, during the COVID, we introduced a mixture of online tutoring by international tutors, followed by in-class sessions with our local editors, trainers, and tutors, which work surprisingly well. We also had to move, our classes are usually very small. So even when we had restrictions, which has been introduced basically overnight. So they were announced, let's say, at 10 p.m. On Sunday, effective Monday, 8 a.m. morning. So we really had to sometimes adjust really fast to the changing circumstances. But what helped us is that we already have a very small classes. And we were also able, thanks to our amazing staff at the YFS, quickly arrange and reorganize the working space. So we could basically divide them in small groups, up to 5 people during the editing course, let's say, and they were staying in a rented apartment. They were living there, and they had a working space where they were, they were working on editing the films, right? So it was very challenging, but last year we managed to, I think, finalize around 8 documentary films, which I think is it's really impressive given the challenges we had to face during the COVID in Myanmar.
And are there any highlights, let's say, of the movies that get produced from school, screening in festivals, or any other kind of successes?
Yeah, in my background, you can see one of the awards from the local festival. But on the wall, you have a poster from an animated documentary We produced 2 years ago. It's about the gender-based violence in a conflict-affected area in Kayah State. And actually, this documentary animation received the Grand Prix at the WHO Health for All Film Festival. There were like several hundred submissions from all over the world, and this, short animation from Myanmar got the Grand Prix. And it made us all really, really proud. And it's always like a great appreciation also for the students and the filmmakers from Myanmar who can see that their work is appreciated, but also that the voice of people from Myanmar is being heard in the world. So to the date, we produced almost 200 short documentaries, docufictions, documentary animations, which received a total of 45 awards at the international and national film festivals. One of our productions from last year, Broken, just like 2 weeks ago, received a special mention at the Yamagata International Documentary Film Festival, which is a great recognition of a documentary, of a first documentary made by this very talented 24-year-old student, Kim Sang-mi.
Okay, great. And tell me a bit about this year cooperation with Five Flavours Festival in Warsaw. How did that came to be?
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm really happy that finally, after so many years, we managed to establish this cooperation. And I'm really excited that the YFS Productions, it will be 5 short documentaries and 5 fiction stories. That they will be screened in Warsaw and they will be also available online. I'm really curious of the how they will be received by the audience in Poland, because not very often you get the information about the country which was so closed, like Myanmar, for so many years, and the films are made, by Myanmar filmmakers. So you really get the view of the country made with you see the country with the eyes of the people who live here, right? Who come from different ethnic, religious, and other minorities. So I'm really happy that it will be presented to the audience in Warsaw. They will be able to see some of our recent productions from last year, which were, filmed like really at the beginning of 2020. And then we were producing, editing and finalizing the production, doing the sound design really during the very hard COVID lockdown, which was extremely challenging. So let me check the titles. So from the last year, it will be The Boy Queen, it will be the Banyan Tree, Easy Money, and Midtown Yangon. Which were produced during this very, very tough time of COVID. But the Polish audience will be also able to watch 2 documentaries which were produced in 2018 on the topic of women inclusion in the peace process in Myanmar, to show that women can also be a part of the peace process at different roles. I really recommend amazing documentaries, Mother at Arms and Seeds of Sadness. One of the 2 older productions from 2016, 32 Souls. I shouldn't really have a favorite, but I think this is always one of my favorite. 32 Souls, a beautiful story from Northern Shan State, made by Sino Kam, who really likes to always combine filmmaking and poetry. And he really goes deep into this traditional Shan music and poetry. And also beautiful, a lovely story, Sugar and Spice, directed by Mimi Louis. She made a really lovely story about her parents. One is a sugar, one is a spice. You can guess which one is which one when you see. Mimi received. She was basically showered with awards for this documentary, and among many others, she received the main prize at the Shorts Tokyo Documentary Film Festival in 2019. And also some of our very first, early documentaries, Bamboo Proof and from 2011, and Bungus. 2011, it's a fiction based on a true story. Which is also one of the results of our screenwriting course, where we encourage students to prepare scripts based on the true stories, and then we produce this kind of, we call them true fictions, which is like a fiction based on a true story. So this is a really nice selection, and I wish I could be in Warsaw with the people to see how they react to those films, but yeah, unfortunately it's not possible. I'm still here in Yangon.
I will be sure to let you know of the reaction of the audience. I'm sure it will be great. And how would you describe the film industry in Myanmar, if there is something that you can call industry? I'm not sure what's the situation there.
Current situation is really challenging, and basically it's really hard to make any films at the moment. There was a military seizure of power in Myanmar in February 2021, so we are still facing plenty of security challenges. But before, I could say that, well, I've been working in Myanmar since 2012, so I could really see how amazingly this industry has developed. So since the very beginnings, at the very first, local, national film festivals, where you could see that there were stories, but there was no really a technique. Like, people wanted to tell the stories, but they didn't really have the the equipment or the necessary skills, or they didn't know how to do properly the sound design, or even translate to make a proper subtitles, right, that you can understand. So I could really see how it developed amazingly. And 2019, the last Watan Film Festival, which is the only national documentary film festival, I was really, amazed by the quality and of the films, the short films that were made in Myanmar and that were screened at this festival. And I was really looking forward to see more of them. The audience in Warsaw will be also able to see another production, a documentary, Money Has Four Legs, which doesn't come from the Yangon Film School, but it's made by the Myanmar filmmaker. So you can really see that everything was going into a right direction. Now everything is on hold, but I keep my fingers crossed very hard that we will be able to go back and work harder to make sure that the audience around the world will be able to enjoy more Myanmar productions in the future, because there are many stories in here. There are very talented young people who really just need the support, like skills, capacity building, and of course funding, which is always crucial when you want to make a good film.
And do you have any rough estimate on how many theaters, cinemas are in Myanmar at the moment?
Oh, at the moment, I think they're all closed. They were closed already, March last year during the COVID, and they remained closed. It's not really much, and they're very strictly controlled. You have either like a national or like private cinemas, which basically screen, blockbusters from Korea or Hong Kong or other Asian blockbusters. So you can't really watch like independent films there. So distribution always remained for us one of the many challenges that we were discussing since the beginning. So we were working on our own distribution channels, but in the cinemas, I don't know, maybe around 100 around the country of 60 million people. So it's not really much. And what we were trying to do is, for the past 10 years, we've been developing our traveling cinema program, where the students of the Yangon Film School were traveling to, ethnic areas like remote communities, and they were organizing like this open-air screenings of YFS documentaries, followed by a Q&A sessions. And then 2 years ago, we established film hubs in different parts of the country in cooperation with youth organizations and we trained them as curators of film screenings. We provide them with equipment to organize the small screenings of films, not only from the Yangon Film School, like a curated screenings follow up by the Q&A session. So to make the audience, more familiar with this different genres of films, but also make them, used to go to watch a film and to talk about film. Unfortunately, this also, all has been cancelled during COVID. During COVID, the beginning of COVID, we had to move to online platforms to have this YFS at cinema at home. events, and later after the military seizure of power in February, we had to just stop those activities at all.
Mm-hmm. So before the whole COVID situation, would you say that the people in Myanmar went to the cinemas? Well, like frequently?
Yes,
I mean,
people here, they love films, they love to laugh, they especially love comedies and horror movies. That's, I mean, and of course action films, like everyone loves action films, and there's like really basic like slapstick comedies which are extremely popular. People love to go to the cinema, and you know, it's like in Asia they just go with the family, with the friends, people just eat and talk in the cinema, so it's not really like experience like you could have in Europe where everyone is sitting in a silence, you have to switch off your phone. It's a completely different experience. But nevertheless, they love to go to the cinema. It's, of course, everyone loved doing it. It was just not that many of the cinemas that were in the country, and also the selection of films was maybe not, there were not that many.
Okay.
Actually,
but do they watch sometimes local films, let's just say Midi films, who is now quite famous abroad?
Mm-hmm. Not really. I mean, the Myanmar product. I mean, the independent Myanmar productions, then they can't really make it to the big screen. There are some local productions, as I mentioned, like horror, like a big production, like a horror films, like the dark cinema, for example, or some of the comedies. Then they made it on the big screen because this is where the money is. And as I mentioned, like most of the cinemas are privately owned, and of course they will screen the films that will bring the high returns.
Okay. So to return back to the school, how do you imagine the future of the school?
Oh God, I mean, well, we have currently like a couple of very interesting films in the production. We are still working on a handover of the school to a local administration. So we are working on the capacity building of our staff. Like a management staff, but also like our local tutors, so they would be able to provide the education, but also manage the school only by Myanmar, by our Myanmar colleagues. I mean, our dream was to have some kind of cooperation with the government to establish the National Film School, where YFS could be a part of the documentary department. But for now, unfortunately, there's no interest, such of interest in doing so. But this would be our long-term goal, let's say,
Okay.
and to have maybe branches in other cities like Mandalay.
Okay. Well, I guess that's it from me. Is there anything you would like to add before we close?
First of all, thank you so much, and I really hope the audience will enjoy our productions. Just remark that these are students' films, so please always, when you watch YFS productions, think that these people they are just starting to learn how to make films, and then you will realize how amazing it is that they actually have been able to do as much. Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate you having the time for us. This is Asia and Movie Pulse interviews from Panos Kotzathanasis and Aleksandra Minkiewicz. Have a nice day. Have a nice day. Bye.